Hi there, this is going to be a description for the introduction to the website building. The first thing we're going to do is actually going to be PO6A, which is the phase 1 through 4, but I wanted to run through this because this is what you're going to be designing for. And I also want to make you aware of this timetable. This is ideal. There may be some days that you work ahead, there might be some days that you fall behind a little bit and then have to catch up. Just be aware that at every juncture, you should be contacting me if you are having trouble. So it might take a little bit of time for us to go back and forth. What I do recommend is if you didn't yet download the let's see what I call it, some sort of screen capturing program. Some of you were using it for critique, some of you didn't. But if you didn't have one by now, you're probably going to need one for this project, because for me to be able to give you feedback on your code or things like that, I'll need to see it, and I want to understand very clearly what you're having trouble with. And doing that by writing out a bunch of stuff is not fun for you to write or for me to read and try to decipher. So anyway, just plan on probably having to do that once we actually get into the coding part. But the first part is just the design section. So what you are designing for is a very simple website. And I want to, I'm going to say this often, but remember that even though this is going to be 5 pages, more than likely you're really only designing one, and then you're going to be copying it and simply replacing the content and the images. So text, images, whatever else you probably won't have more than that for this site. So just know, it seems like 5 might seem a lot to you, but really it's 1 page that we're designing. And then as we get that designed, it becomes your template. And then from there you simply copy paste. That's it. So usually for people, the majority of the work, like 95%, is the first page, and then the last 4 take almost no time at all if you've got your content ready. You're going to have a menu of 4 or more things, because your home page is one of the pages, and you don't always have to have an extra page that your links go to, because you can make simply your logo go to that page. And it should. You can have a redundant one. It could be 5 links. Or some of you guys might do more than 5 pages, and that's fine. A simple logo in the form of a PNG, a GIF, or a JPEG. Likely more PNG or GIF, because it's pretty rare that your logos are going to be a JPEG. Shouldn't have probably any photo in it. And that should be present on each page, because you never know where someone is going to land on your page. Could be from, it doesn't need to land on homepage, right? So make sure that it's just branded carefully. And then 5+ graphics or photos. So this does not include the logo, by the way. But this could be graphics, this could be photographs. I'm not too picky about which it is. And it could be quite small also. But I don't want them to be social media icons. You are allowed to add social media icons, but I don't want them to count for your graphics. Just some larger ones that people can really see. And then you're going to have an external style sheet, which right now you don't have to worry about in the design phase. Just know that that's going to be part of the construction. And then finally, what you're going to turn in is for the critique. You have a whole entire website folder with everything in it. And I have that twice, so oops, I'll just take that out. For the critique part, that's what you'll need. And for the grade, it's basically the exact same thing, except that you have to have all 5 pages done at that point. For the critique, I just want to see 1, so that's the difference there. Basically, it is everything twice, except for the first round, at least 1 page, and then for the second round, you'll have all your pages done at that point. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next part here, and we can look at that. Alright, so here's the design phase, and I call it the phase 1 through 4 because there's a few things that I want you to do. You have to do research first, then think about the information architecture, how that site is planned out, website information, it's kind of all lumped together, and then wireframe, which is really simplistic, rudimentary drawing of what the structure will be, and then finally the design itself, which looks real but isn't quite real in terms of it looks like you could click on it, but really it's just a flat image. It's not an actual functioning website. It's called a design comp. And so I want you to do this before you actually start the website construction, because if you don't have a good plan going in, it's just going to be a mess. I just tried to build it. The cleaner your design, and the more designed I should say that it is, the easier it will be to build. Okay, so make sure you download this. This is going to be this, of course, so that's going to be taken care of. And then there are all of these documents here that can help you in that design process. And when you're finally done, you're going to make a multi-page PDF and turn it in. No one is necessarily commenting on this because I want you to be able to move pretty quickly into the design construction phase. Yeah, I will be the only one seeing this one. All right, so here we have the document. And basically, again, it's just your research and to culminate into your design before you construct. So we've got the first part, which is phase one, and that's just research. So I want you to look at other people's websites. Remember that when you do this part, you must also check your phone for the same website that you're looking on your computer, because you need to see how it adapts. Is it reactive? Does it respond to the screen size? It should, but there's a lot of websites out there that still don't. So it doesn't have to react in order for you to choose to talk about it, but it's good for you to always see a website that you like on both platforms, or even more. You could also check it on a tablet if you have one. You can also simply change the size of your browser window, and that will sometimes make it react as well, which I'll show in a little while. So here we have our information architecture second. And, this is basically just the information. Now, what I would suggest here is to copy and paste this right here into your document and simply answer the questions. That will be a little bit easier for you to do. Most of these are pretty simplistic, like what's the website name, like what would the URL of the domain be, www.what.com, or not necessarily .com, it could be .tv, it could be a whole lot of extensions there. Target audience, who are you trying to reach? What's your demographic? And that's pretty important when you think about the design. And remember, it can just be general audience, that's fine, but sometimes it's going to be more specific than that. And if so, please state that. Is there a purpose for the site? Does it have multiple purposes? A short paragraph that describes the company. This would basically be, the stuff that you would want popped up when you search for Google. This should be on your actual website at some point, but go ahead and start that process here. The 20 keywords, you just want to make sure that in your document you actually have those keywords, because if you don't have those words in your actual website, people won't be bringing up the content that you want when they do searches in Google and stuff like that. So just make sure that you have at least 20 keywords that are popping up in your stuff someplace. Sitemap is just a really simplistic, and you'll see this. I don't even care if you've done it by hand or not. I just want a simple map that tells me when I get to the home page, where do I go from there. Wireframes, again, those are very simplistic versions of a design without color, without much of anything fancy like fonts and all that. It's just really basic layout. And then you want to start getting all that stuff. So this question here kind of continues down here. This is just helps you figure out what you need to get yet. How do you need to prepare for this? This is the sitemap, very simplistic one. So you start at a home page, and then there are 4 main menu items off of that, and then from there, some of them have drop-down menus to go further, and some of them don't. But this is pretty typical of a lot of websites. And then site content, figure out what your images are, things like that. You might not have all of them by the time you're ready to construct the website, but you need to start thinking about it. When you're thinking about the navigation, this is going to come up a few times, but always, of course, it has to be clear. How do people know how to get to where they want to go? So phase 3, wireframes, and again you can see that these are very simple basic layouts, just black and white, no color at this point is recommended, because you really want to think about the structural basic components. Where will an image go? Where's text going to go? Is there going to be headers? And some of you guys might reuse or recycle your homepage design over and over, and others of you might adapt your first design to be for your secondary pages, and so you'll have to think about how you will design those, or you're just going to stick to the one. And then when you design that page, it's not only what it's going to look like on your laptop or desktop, but you can also think of it for the tablet. That's an optional one though, but you have to also think about it for what it will look like on your phones. So for the mobile design, this is basically what I want you to think of. If you have a logo on this page, well, of course, you're going to have a logo on that page. Same page, right? But where does it go? Because these pieces, if you want to think about them like movable blocks, you can move the content around. And some things will grow in size. For example, the featured image is probably always going to be pretty significant. But what I want you to notice is there's no extra space. It collapsed and filled it, because on a phone, obviously, you don't need that space. And then the featured image areas, they no longer go side by side. On a phone, they need to stack. And so this is the reason that it looks like this. So it's really that the content, although technically content can disappear, you can actually turn off sections of websites. I'm not recommending it. For this one, we'll simply move your content from how it looks on a larger screen to how it looks like on a very small screen. And so what we're talking about here is a responsive website. That's the entire point. Now, when you design these, it could be done in Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, or Fireworks if you have it. That's an old school program for web design. I will also say that there are many programs out there now to design these, but that would require more software and more time to learn a new software. Since you are already familiar with these three at least, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, you will use one of those. Now, if you have prior experience using developer tools and you know that you can use Sketch or some other things to make the wireframes and the design comps, you're welcome to use those, as long as I can see JPEGs in the end, or PNGs or GIFs, to see the designs. That's what I'm concerned with. So yeah, but I would say if you don't know those other programs, please just stick to what you've just learned rather than adding to your stack of stuff that you need to do. Now, what we call here responsive website, I think we all want those. We don't want to have to zoom in on our phones in order to read text. That's really annoying. But it still happens, you know. Websites that were made maybe 4 years ago even might not, they should have, but they might not have done the media query properly. So what we do is we make these websites become responsive by using something called media query. And it sounds complicated and scary, but it's super simplistic. Basically, we'll have a box, let's say this one, that holds this. And for this size, we tell it one set of instructions, like, hey, I want you to basically fill maybe 90% of the screen. Whereas on this one, we would give it a different one, and we'd say, hey, if the screen that you are showing up on is less than, like, say, like 400 pixels, you must expand to fit. So it's really just ifs, like, hey, if you're on this screen, look like this. If you're on this screen, shrink or enlarge or move or drop, whatever the case is. It's just new sets of instructions to the website based on the screen that it recognizes. So that's probably the easiest way to say it. And then we finally move from just real basic wireframes, which just help you think about the structure, to actually making it look real. So typically what would happen is you talk to your client about what the structure might actually be, you know, what is the actual flow of the website, and then you make, once they decide which way they like, then you would move on to the design comp. And that is where you make it look as real as possible, but if you clicked on it, it wouldn't actually do anything because it's just a flat image. And you can even bring these up. You can open images, I'm sure you know this, but in case you don't, you can open an image in a browser, and so it looks extremely real and clickable, but it won't do anything. So, you know, in this one, you actually put the logo. You actually put some text if you think you know what it will be. You put some images in. Now, for the design comp, if you're not exactly sure what your image will be yet, but you know about the right size, and you know maybe about the kind of contrast, or let's say you use a bunch of adjustment layers because you want a really specific coloring, you would want to put that in your design comp so that the client would understand the aesthetic, not just of the structure or the logo, but the aesthetic of the images you're going to use. And then not only will you probably noticed up here, I have two different sets, right? I've got one for the home page, and then one for the mobile home page, and then one for the secondary page as well as its mobile version. You don't have to go as far as that, as long as you do one set. So if you, like for this one, I just did the home page, and then the menu collapses, you know, here to here, and I didn't do a lot of change with the text. It became gray, and you know, these images will simply flow down instead of being side by side. So it's a fairly simple change overall. But that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for complicated websites for this. Don't do that to yourself. Stick to something pretty simple. Let your images and all of your other stuff do the work. Your structure can be quite simplistic. It's best anyway for it to show up properly. So let's see. Again, probably whatever you built it in for the wireframes, I would suggest you copy those wireframes or use different artboards, or simply, duplicate the file and then add your stuff. So it's essentially, if you build them with a program for the first time for the wireframes, you can simply reuse it and just add more for the design comp. Some things to think about. For colors start to become very important, how they play off of each other. Do you have a consistent color that you'll always be showing in the, for this? If not, should your design be overall quite bland in order to support a wide range of imagery or graphics that you're going to be putting on it? That tends to be the trend right now, but you could buck the trend and do something kind of crazy. But it just depends on the site that you have as to whether or not that's a viable thing to do. All right, so yeah, so some things here, what fonts, what colors, and the fonts and the colors might change based on if it's title or content, or let's say that you have little headers for your images or descriptions, things like that. They all might change, size at least, colors and style probably. Then navigation, things like where is your navigation? Navigation menu, interchangeable for me. A lot of people will call it navigation for website development. The menu's fine too, though. And then, the navigation, will it be on every page? Does it show up twice on every page? It should show up on every page, but some people will have modified versions of it, or a couple of it like it'll maybe show up on the bottom as well as the top. Is there going to be any interactive element for the menu? Not necessary for me or required for the project, but you could. But keep it really simple. Think about color shifts. Maybe the text changes to bold. Backgrounds can change. Anything too much more complex than that's going to drive you nuts. So I would probably just keep it as simple as possible. And then what I would like you to include when you do those design comps is in text somewhere near it, like off the side, however you put it. Include the text numbers, because you're going to need those eventually anyway. So perhaps like I would need the gray color. I would need the white color for the background. If I had different fonts for different titles and content things, I would want that as well. So anytime you change a color, you need to have that hex number ready. And just as a reminder for the hex number, you can grab it from the color picker. So here's your color picker. It's going to look the same in Illustrator and Photoshop, but you can simply, click whatever color you need, and your hex number's down here. So you can simply copy that number. It's either going to be 6 or 3-digit, usually 6, hence hex, and then you have that to paste inside of your document. And then the final stage of this is, and you're kind of thinking through it, and you might want to actually be more specifically thinking about it once you see this last part. These are all sectioned off in areas that could essentially be rectangles. Some of the rectangles are nested inside of each other. Like these 3 could actually be sitting inside of another rectangle. This whole section could be sitting inside of a bigger rectangle or square, etc. And they probably will in the end. You just don't know yet. And so what I would like you to do is, to the best of your ability at this point, think about what these things are called, right? So if we look at this, well, that makes sense. It's called the logo, right? The menu would be up next to it. Main image or featured image, secondary images, content. They can be very basic ways of calling these things. There's nothing fancy. If you ever do more website stuff, you'll recognize that there's some terms that are pretty frequently used, but it's not a have to. You can create your own. So you can either create this document separate from the wireframe and or your design comps, or you can overlay colors on top of one of your designs and simply make it into a new document. So for example, here I have it separated, but I can, logo, navigation, text, content, things like that. Make sure you use an underscore for separation. You cannot use spaces in code. It doesn't work. So underscores are fine if you need that break, and I understand. And then, teaser 1, 2, 3, footer, those are all really basic kind of ways to say it. And I'm going to open up a file now so you can kind of see what I mean here. So this is a website that I like to visit. It's called Beautiful Decay. And it used to be a magazine that I got. But anyway, it changes quite often. If I refresh this or go back to another thing, I'll get a different image here. But it's just a bunch of artists and designers. Some fun stuff to look at. And what I want to show you is what you guys are used to by now. Of course, a lot of websites are littered now with ads, right? That's how they get their revenue. So you can see ad, and there's more and more ads down there. So the content of the site is really, you've got the header up here, you've got your navigation in two different places, one that's more small, less important, and one that's, quite important. If you can even do submissions. And so for this one, I just want to kind of walk you through the way that it's laid out. They have these currently trending areas, and they also have these, get social stuff, and they have some currently trending things all over the place, as many places as possible. And after every story, they have another currently trending, so it kind of keeps going like that. Now, on a larger website like this is on a laptop, there's room for this stuff to be on the side. Even though it still feels a bit cluttered, technically there's room, right? So basically you've got top area up here that spans the space, but the text doesn't go beyond a certain area. Can you see that? It's like here to here. And then you've got one area here and one area here. Then what happens when you make this window smaller is that it has to start to react. So what I want you to see is that the spaces on the side get shorter. And then at a certain point, when you reach a certain area, you can see you can see it's starting to cut it off, so they didn't do a great job with their responsive site. And then finally, it took a while. This is not the best built site. If you scroll down, you can see that all that content that used to be on the side shifts down. Okay, so one quick thing you can see is social stuff's going to pop up above, so it's going to move from there to above, and then the other things just get scooted in underneath. Like that ad that we saw before on the side is now underneath. So the content shifted, right? I don't think it lost content. It simply moved it. And that's an important thing about responsive design, is that the content moves according to the size that's most appropriate. Well, let me rephrase that. The content reframes itself to fit the size of the monitor or window, whatever screen you're looking at. It changes to fit it, and that's really important now, since probably half the websites you look at might actually be on your phone. Now, I took this and I brought it over to Photoshop, so we'll take a look at that. So let's pretend that this is your design. You've got your desktop version over here, and you've got your mobile view over here, and possibly a tablet view if you're crazy enough to do that third one. And remember, you can have tons of sizes in between there, but those are going to be the basic sizes. Now, what I would want you to think about doing for the part where you're going to be adding the indication of the divs. So we talked about the fact, like, this is an area up here, right? This area up is the same on both. Sometimes you'll see more of a drastic change, but on this one there isn't. And the font just gets smaller to fit the size. But what does happen, again, is your content changes. You can see this one got knocked down, and all of this stuff, the social got brought up, and then some of the things just simply got pushed down to a place where we can't see it. But what I would like you to do then is think about that same area. So I covered it in the orange, same area that, and then what would it be called? You can make up that name again, but I'm going to call it the nav and the title together. So you can do underscores to collapse things. Now, I do want you to be aware that once you actually start to construct this, you will very likely, and you will have to, make this into more than just one chunk. But as long as you've got that chunk indicated here, it'll help your brain prepare. So essentially, probably what you'll end up doing is, if you were actually going to do this one, would be it would be nav1, title, social, nav2, all chucked into one, because remember, you can nest things. And then I would probably say for this one, I would do something like a box over all of this. And then, you would figure out the box over the other one. Now, this one is a little bit trickier than what you guys will need to do because you can see that their content pushes in and out. Typically, for our purposes, you'll have column 1 that simply gets, column 2 gets collapsed underneath it rather than picking and pushing its way in there. But anyway, well, all I want you to do is either overlay color, like you can see here to design, and you overlay color, or we go back to what this one looked like. And as long as you have something laid out where I can look at this and I can look at your design comp or your wireframes and make sense of what you're trying to do, that's what I want. In the end, you'll probably end up using the names you come up with here, but you might change them, but that's okay. I anticipate lots of things to change. What I want you to have is a guide, as a guidance for yourself so that you can work efficiently. At the end of this document is just some stuff. You can just copy and paste this if you want to into your own document, and I would like you to build this in InDesign because it's just good practice. And basically your first page will probably be research. Your second page still might be research. You can make your little, you'll have to read through this more carefully, but I do say, like your examples of, okay, so up here, your examples that you get online and I make screenshots of could be as small as 2.5 inches in your document. They don't have to be large, but they could be bigger. The bigger they are, the more pages you fill up. So I'm not going to dictate how many pages this document is. It might change drastically from person to person. So let's say that your phase 1 is maybe 2 pages. Your phase 2 might just be 1 or 2 pages again. Depends on how big your little sitemap is. But these are the questions. So remember, you still have to add a sitemap. You need those questions answered. Wireframes for the phase 3. And then I had said if you want your divs to be named or listed here instead of on the design comp, you're welcome to do that. And then phase 4 is the design comp. And what I'm looking for is one for your mobile view and one for desktop. But you can, of course, do multiple other ones should you wish to. And then on a separate page or on the design comp page, kind of depends on how much room you have. What I want to see is your stuff listed out. So your hex numbers, your fonts, and any of your navigation information. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Let me know, of course, if you have any questions. And you probably already have websites you really like that you would want to emulate. What you might want to do first, though, is once you decide what your website's going to be about, to go ahead and look at your competition or your would-be competition to get an idea of what's a trend in your area, and either, again, decide to follow the trend or completely ignore it and do whatever you want. I'm fine with either route.